Yeah, what a fucking nightmare. I don't understand
That sucks.
what the hell the problem is. I need a prescription refilled.
Yeah.
Supposed to refill today. They got a text that said they'll be ready in 5 days. So I called in and she checked on it. She was like, oh, they've been filling the wrong prescription for you. Like, we can't refill it till tomorrow. And I'm like, why? Like, just fill today. So she changed the prescription.
No wonder my boobs have been feeling weird. No wonder I've been crying so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
I know.
But my toenails have been never more lustrous.
It's true. I mean, you got to take the good with the bad.
Right.
Bad with the good. I don't know. One of those. Yeah. So now she's like, your insurance doesn't cover this. I'm like, you've been filling it every month.
Is it a different drug? Or are they just
No.
like different dosage or something like that?
Nothing has changed.
Well, what have they been filling wrong? You just said they were filling something wrong.
They were filling a smaller script.
As in the amount you're supposed to get should be more.
Yes, an increased amount.
Gotcha. Well, now you don't get any of it. So there you go. Greedy. Greedy fucker.
I think that's how she ended it. She's like, oh yeah? How about no medication?
Yeah, how you like that now?
Yeah.
See you in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Have fun coping with your depression.
Yes, exactly. Good luck. By the way, your toenails look fabulous.
Welcome back to your favorite podcast, Native Tongues, where we speak with writers and musicians about where they call home and how that place influenced their voice. I'm your host, Aaron Palmer, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and good buddy, Ken Hall. If you like what you're listening to, please do us a favor and share it with a friend. Help spread the word. Take a second to give us 5 stars or write a short review on Apple Podcasts. Look us up and follow us on Instagram at Native Tongues Pod. It all helps us grow this little show. Now, on to the guest. This week, we have a very high-energy author. She started her career in journalism. She has since published 1 nonfiction, 1 book of short stories, and 6 critically acclaimed, best-selling, and award-winning novels. She's also written on 7 comic book series. Her book, Shining Girls, was adapted into an Apple TV miniseries starring Elizabeth Moss. Her book, Broken Monsters, and her comic series Survivors Club are both in development for TV shows. She's also written on 3 animated shows and worked in a number of other film projects. Originally from South Africa and growing up during the Apartheid, she now lives in London, where she's planted roots. Let's welcome the delightful Lauren Beukes.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically dark outside, so it might as well be evening, even though it's 3:30
I was just about to say,
Yes.
it gets dark here. Oh, sorry, we actually don't get the sun today. Just no sun, just it's going to be dark.
Yeah.
Are you in England? Or are you in London? Where are you?
I'm in London.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It is. It feels like London here in Baltimore, Maryland today. It is.
Yeah, I can imagine. Does
It
it
is-
also get dark early?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Real bleak.
It's unspeakable. It never happens in South Africa, and it's been the hardest thing to adjust to, actually.
Really?
It's just having to deal with
Like you don't
the
get
darkness. Cold is okay, but the darkness is terrible.
like the winter. I mean, we cross some sort of point in like late October, November, where the sun will not set after 5 o'clock until like February or March. So like you just know it's like you get plunged into like 5 months of eternal darkness. It just feels this whole body clock's off.
Yeah, none of us are ever going to survive Antarctica, guys. We're just not going
Oh
to.
no. Did you watch the True Detective?
I did.
Oh my God.
I really loved
I was
it.
like, everything feels like it takes place at 4 o'clock in the morning, like the witching hour. Like,
Is that better? Because then you just know you're like, it's night all the time. You're not looking forward to the sun. There's no expectations,
I don't know.
I think as humans, we have a way of kind of glossing over how bad things are and kind of we forget. In the moment, it's terrible. And then, a year later, it's like, oh, it won't be too bad. And I'm just like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to survive.
This happens to me literally every year.
Yeah.
Almost on the same day too.
Like, but the True Detective thing, that's like, for me, I just feel like it added such a claustrophobia to the show.
Definitely.
And I can't imagine that when you're there, it doesn't feel like that. You know what I mean? Like, it is cold, it's windy, it's just dark.
There's probably vampires out there.
Definitely. And zombies, yeah.
And ice monsters and zombies. And
Apparently at the McMurdo base in Antarctica, I was there and I wasn't at McMurdo, but I went to Antarctica in 2019 in a tourism thing. And but at McMurdo Base, apparently what they do is when you arrive, they show you the thing, and then the Christmas movie is The Shining. Like, that's perfect.
Very similar in my household.
That would be. That's great.
I love that.
I have a buddy who randomly became a firefighter in Antarctica. Like,
oh wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so I worked for like an ad agency.
Is that even a job?
It is actually. Well, they do have fires in theory. And he was an editor, and then just life change, kind of decided to do that. He had been a volunteer firefighter, and then one thing led to another, and he was hopping on a plane to Antarctica and was there.
Oh my God.
Like, yeah, right. Stationed
Where's
for
the lowest amount of risk?
Possibly, yeah. Although you got to watch out for ice monsters and crazy.
True. So you said South Africa a minute ago.
Yeah, I grew up in Johannesburg, and then I spent 20 years in Cape Town, and I've been in the UK for 3 years. I've just got indefinite leave to remain, which means I am geographically secure, which is very nice.
Okay.
Because up until now, I was just like, well, they could still decide that they don't want me to stay and not, grant me leave to remain. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not the United States.
No, that's, guys, what are you doing? Please, can you make it unhappen? Also, I'm so sorry that there's South African centered at all of this. Of course, the world's worst supervillain would be a white South African man.
Right. I think we saw that in Lethal Weapon 2.
Yeah, we had fair warning. We should have known better.
You should have known.
The accent.
That's true.
So you're geographically, is that what they call it? Geographically secure?
I don't know what they call it.
Okay. All right. That's a good word for it.
I don't know if there is. It's my word for it.
Yeah.
I've got a friend who was homeless, and he refers to himself as he went through a period of being vulnerably housed, and I think he was vulnerably geographized. I don't want to compare it to homelessness or kind of like migrant status or refugee status or anything like that, but
it's a good spin.
Yeah,
you've got a backup career in marketing.
Great. AI doesn't take over everything.
That's true.
I don't know. Volunteer firefighter in Antarctica sounds way more.
I was going to say,
and
then apparently you can just do that. I don't know.
Yeah,
perfect. He's a big guy.
It's a thing.
Yeah,
right.
If you can make it.
So in South Africa, like, what brought you from South Africa? First of all, actually, before you even answer that, let me talk over you some more. So I got ahead of myself
because I feel like you're really practicing for that.
Right, it's good. My son was they're doing reports on world geography soon, and he was like all mopey because he got South Africa.
South Africa's amazing.
He was like, "There's nothing in South Africa," and I'm like, "Yes, there is. Like, what are you talking about?"
Oh, they have penguins. Don't you have penguins in South Africa?
We do have penguins. We do.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And also, I've swum in Antarctica where it was 4 degrees Celsius, but the Cape Town beaches are like 9 degrees Celsius because we get that Antarctic current.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I think that's why the penguins like it.
Yeah, that was.
You have to wear 2 swimsuits.
No, basically, it's exactly the same. Swimming in Cape Town is exactly the same as swimming in Antarctica. You run in screaming and you run out screaming. It counts as a swim as long as you go under with your head.
Okay,
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good because generally speaking, when you're going swimming, I'm trying to make it some sort of feat that I've accomplished. Like we go to the beach for the summer and let's go. Like, I did it. I made it.
So there's really no swimming there in Cape Town.
No, people do swim, and you can adjust to the water. It's actually better in winter because there's not so much difference between the air and the water. Sure. But also, I think what's terrible is it looks Mediterranean blue. It's got that beautiful turquoise and the gradation of color. You're like, it's going to be warm. It's not warm. It's like you can feel like you're ankle deep and the cold shoots up in through your femurs, into your hips. You can feel it in your bones. It's not good.
I bet everyone there looks really young, though.
Oh, yeah, like Clifton Beach is like really, yeah. Oh, and all the models come down to be photographed. I'm not sure if cold water keeps you looking younger.
Isn't it supposed to be like cold plunge? I don't know. I don't know if it keeps you looking younger. I know it's supposed to be good for your immune system.
I think it is. I think like cold dipping and cold swimming, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I've never done it though. I don't know.
No, I want to, but I'm very scared to.
The closest as I can say I came to that was I did a triathlon, and it was 42 degrees at the start of the race, so fair. But the water.
Yeah, so you did a triathlon, whatever.
Yeah, real humble brag.
Well, but the water was 60 degrees.
So it was like balmy.
Right.
Oh my God, dude. It was crazy. Like we got in the water and I was like, oh gosh, here we go. And I got in the water. I was like, oh no, this is kind of nice. Like, okay, all right. This is great. This is lovely. Yeah, this is great.
So what drove you out of South Africa?
More career opportunities. I'm closer to the rest of the world here. But also South Africa is, sure, you guys will not be able to relate as Americans at all. It's pretty complicated right now.
Yeah.
And has been for a while, so we dealing with the legacy of colonialism, dealing with the legacy of apartheid. And the only reason the apartheid government gave up was because they were bankrupt. Sanctions actually worked. So they handed over a bankrupt state to a bunch of idealists who were wonderful, but also within the factions of the idealists, classic post-revolution government, you've got a lot of corrupt factions as well. People who are like, well, I fought for this country and nearly died for it, so now I want to get rich.
Right. Or I brought us to the promised land. I've liberated us. Now I want my spoils.
Yeah,
exactly. On the one hand, we have one of the most progressive constitutions on earth. On the other, we're the 5th highest in the world for gender-based violence. And we're number 1 in the world for the Gini coefficient, which is a divide between rich and poor. So there are just a lot of people suffering. I think the unemployment is about 47%. Literacy is 40%. We have a very young population who don't have a lot of opportunity.
Do you think that's good because of the history? Just sort of that legacy
absolutely.
of just sort of still digging out from that terrible time of
completely,
history?
Absolutely. Slavery in America was 400 years ago. Like, you guys still haven't gone over that.
Right. That's I was like, we kind of started the clock a little bit sooner, but
the wounds are deep, and the systemic damage is deep.
Yeah, parts of our country still aren't over it.
Yeah,
true. It's true. No.
So you were in a country with a 40% literacy rate, and you chose to be a writer.
Yeah, I don't think I knew that, and I'm definitely gonna have to fact check that if we're putting that in the podcast.
Well, it's already in. That's
great.
It's done. It's just quoted by. Were you a big reader though? I guess as a
completely.
kid. And okay.
I've wanted to. I wanted to be a writer since I was 5 years old, and I found out that I could.
Really?
Yeah, and that you could make up stories for a living, and you get paid to do that. That was a job that you could have. I was like, yes, sign me up. That sounds amazing.
What were you reading? Like, what drove you early on, and then what actually really hooked you?
So
I'm less interested in not necessarily what you were reading at 5.
I want to know. That's hard.
Unless it's something really amazing, which could be
great. So my dad was reading it to me. We had an illustrated edition, but I got really tired of my parents having to wait for them to read me the story. So apparently, I taught myself to read. Is the family lore? I don't know if that's true, but I sat there with a highlighter and kind of highlighted the words I didn't know. Total book desecration. So I just I was like, you need to give me my story crack. Give it to me now.
All right. Wow.
Yeah.
I like it. And the highlighting of it makes it feel more like
studious,
novel, like digging in as a
studious. Yeah.
Although probably half the words in there are made up. So
absolutely, definitely.
It's true.
But Hobbit. So you're
true.
Into some fantasy. Yeah. What did you really get into? Once you actually started reading on your own?
So kind of fantasy and sci-fi. My mom got me into fantasy. My dad got me into more kind of sci-fi. I was never a Judy Blume girl. I never liked Jane Austen. I didn't like realist novels. I wanted there to be wild adventure. I wanted something strange to happen.
Yeah.
And and I also read a lot of comics. So I got my sex education from my mother's French edition of Barbarella, where Barbarella just has sex with everyone. And I was like, oh, okay, that seems good.
It's very sex positive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was great. And then I also read ElfQuest. I read 2000 AD, which is, of course, the British comic. Because I grew up in South Africa under sanctions, a lot of the American comics would come through very sporadically. So we get Amethyst 43, and then 6 months later, you might get Amethyst 52, and you're like, well, I don't know what happened in between.
Right, right.
But 2000 AD came out monthly, so you had a complete story in the comic, and they were all very, metaphorical and allegorical about dystopias and kind of Johnny Alpha. And of course, comics have always done this with the X-Men and stuff, but the mutants having to deal with kind of an apartheid state and this mutant apartheid. But it was also the same in 2000 AD. But you also had these fascist police with Judge Dredd. Mm-hmm. And it felt like a really interesting way of kind of exploring the world through this kind of fantastical medium. I think South African theater also had a huge impact because there was a lot of censorship. So you weren't allowed to write novels or theater directly about the apartheid state. And actually, Special Branch, who were the secret police, would come in and sit at the back of the theater and take notes on who else was there and also what the play was about. And they could actually stand up and put a stop to the entire play. You always knew who they were because they had terrible shoes, apparently.
You mean they wore Crocs?
Thanks for adding that in.
But yeah, so I think that was, and so South African theater became very allegorical, and they started using, there was this great playwright called Andrew Buckland, who was also, he kind of did a one-man show, and he did a lot of kind of mime, but mime as in not the guy with the white face miming being behind a wall, but just very physical comedy and like playing all the different characters and switching his whole performance up to be like a different character and a different story. And he had a story about something called a Parktown prawn, which is what District 9 was inspired by, which is a really disgusting red glossy king cricket.
And that's pretty much the movie.
No, pretty much. And he wrote a play called The Ugly Nunu, which was about this kind of oppressed cricket and kind of how people were afraid of it. And it was really about kind of like, I might be mangling this. It's been decades since I've seen the play, but it was an allegory for kind of living under apartheid and this fear of this creature, which of course was the fear of the Red Scare and the Black Scare, which is what South Africans were growing up with, white South Africans were growing up with, and the kind of regime of terror that we were living under.
Geez, that's got to be like kind of inspiring, I guess, for you.
Oh, yeah.
Then, right? You're like, not only can I now, there's somebody that is not only making up their own stories, but are kind of like, hoodwinking the powers that be. You're telling a story that means something, and
Absolutely.
also feeling like you're kind of getting over. And if people, you have that sort of subculture of if you know, kind of a thing.
And it felt like that was the way to address the important issues, is to be able to take people on a transportive journey, take them to this kind of strange and amazing world, but then use that as a way of talking about the big issues that were so real and relevant and resonant with where we are.
Was there a lot of that?
At that time, there was a lot of it. I remember reading a book in my Afrikaans class, and we all had to learn Afrikaans. And it was about the Irish Revolution, but it was really a way of talking about, like there were kind of activists who were hiding out and being kind of trying to get away from the oppressors. And they just it was a very clever way of kind of exploring these big issues in this way.
Were they making like that connection? Like, so you're in school learning about them. Were they making the connections between the two?
But I also went to a private school. So first of all, there were Black kids in my school, which there weren't elsewhere.
Right. Which probably is for you from a worldview sort of thing.
Absolutely.
The gift that probably was.
Definitely. And also, I had a Black brother growing up who is not biologically related to me in any way.
Oh, wow.
But he was our domestic worker's son in a very fucked up South African way. But he grew up with our family, and my dad sent him to like private boarding school, like the top school in South Africa, and he's now a TV director. But just having that other perspective, my parents were involved with starting Habitat for Humanity in South Africa with their church. And, so I was very, very lucky in a time when a lot of people were very sheltered, and the education system and censorship was designed to keep the truth from people about this incredibly oppressive state, which some people still don't understand exactly how bad it was. We had a national torture squad. We had a chemical weapons program that was trying to make Black people infertile. They were poisoning activists. They were doing like horrifying assassinations. And also the government, the apartheid government knew that these people were bad. Their nicknames from their own team. The head of the torture unit, Eugene de Kock, his nickname was Primeval by his own team.
Right.
And Wouter Basson, who headed up the chemical weapons program, was known as Dr. Death. And during the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where people actually were dealing with the crimes, and the whole idea of the TRC was that white people would come and talk about the atrocities that they performed. And also, there was some awful things which happened with Black activists as well, where people were bombed and killed people. Sure. It was a really difficult thing to get through without there being violence on both sides.
Practically a civil war in a way.
Pretty much, yeah. So the idea was that people would confess and tell the truth, and people would also then be able to find out where their families were. And families went to Eugene de Kock and said, my son was an activist. He was like 22 years old. The last time we saw him was this time. And he said, okay, yes, I do remember him. We killed him. And after we tortured him, and I think he's buried on the side of the road, kind of the place where we dumped bodies.
Good Lord.
So people were able to go and find them. But during the TRC Commission hearings, what happened was that Wouter Basson, the Dr. Death, just stalled and stalled and stalled and stalled and stalled. And finally, it was the final day of the TRC. He didn't have to appear. He didn't have to deal with anything. But everybody was signing their names in the cafe in the small town where the hearings were being held. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu signed his name, and Ankie Krok, who's an amazing South African journalist who wrote a book called Country of My Skull about the TRC hearings. She signed her name. And Dr. Death comes in and he literally signs Dr. Death on the wall.
Oh, my God.
Like, yeah. Oh, my God. And, the other problem with the TRC is like there was truth, but the reconciliation was supposed to come from Black people who were supposed to forgive the white people. And the white people never really, as a general society, we never had to be like, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry that it's not my fault. I didn't choose it. But I grew up super privileged because I grew up white in an apartheid state. And I had every privilege handed to me. And that doesn't, people think that privilege means that, I never suffered. And no, of course I suffered. Of course I've had a whole life. I've had lots of complexities. But I
But you didn't have the same level of worry
and struggle.
I was not having to worry about my child. I wasn't the child that my parents were having to worry about being shot and killed for being an activist.
Right. Wow.
But so the problem was that, the TRC actually recommended that there should be reparations paid. And they never were because, unfortunately, as I said, the ANC government inherited a bankrupt state. So they weren't actually able to do that. But on the other hand, our new constitution was amazing. We entrenched abortion is a constitutional right in South Africa. France tried to say, I think earlier this year, France was like, we're the first country in the world to make abortion a constitutional right. It's like, no, guys, we did that in 96.
Right.
We were the fifth country in the world to ratify gay marriage. In South Africa at the moment, South African Sign Language just became the 12th national language. We've built more free houses for our population than any other country on earth.
Wow.
And you can also now identify as MF or X on your identity document, and X can mean whatever you want it to. You don't have to go through medical procedures. You don't have to get anyone to certify you. You're just like, my identity is X.
I can tell like how even though you live in London, you're obviously still super connected to it and super in there, which is cool. It's great.
I think there's like wherever you're from, I think home is deep baked into you. And of course, there are a lot of South Africans in London as well, so that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's also wild to see both sides of that during your lifetime. Like, we're so sheltered and removed from all of this, I mean, anything that took place here in the United States happened in other parts of the United States or well before we were born. And to see the worst side of it and then the turn
but then
during your lifetime.
To see people still suffering, the fact that we still have the fifth highest rate of gender-based violence.
Yeah.
To see that we're still, and I think that's one of the reasons I felt like I had to leave, because I have a daughter. So raising her in that country was really, really hard. But also, you see a lot of suffering. And there's a way to live in South Africa where you just live in your nice fancy car and you drive to your nice fancy private school and your nice house with your swimming pool and your private security and your electric fence. And you can just shut down what's happening around you. But I've never been able to do that.
Yeah.
I just think between COVID and like just kind of social issues, it's just been really hard to see what everyday people have to endure all the time.
When you say gender-based violence, do you mean men on women, or does this have to do with
men on women, but
trans?
Also trans women. So trans women are obviously like murdered at a higher rate, I think, across the world. But gender-based violence in South Africa is really bad. And there are many reasons for that, from lack of education and lack of opportunity to the fact that the apartheid government broke society because they forced men to go and work in the mines, and that was the only economic opportunity they had for black men. But they weren't allowed to bring their families with them, so they broke the families. I know, and it just seemed like, the legacy of that.
Right.
We also have a lot of single mothers.
That goes hand in hand with that sort of broken family structure, right?
Yeah.
You lead to that, and then that begets the next generation of that, and so on. I mean, it's the same thing, not to that institutionalized degree, but the same thing we see a lot here in America too.
No, so it's really interesting to see what's happening in America right now and kind of see, which of course is something I've done in my work, with the Shining Girls, although it's about a time-traveling serial killer in Chicago. I'm using Chicago as an analog for South Africa, and a lot of the issues are very similar. The fact that they had black lighting and red lighting to try and force black people into other neighborhoods and kind of create segregation. The apartheid government actually went to Chicago in the 50s to learn how to do segregation better. And what you do is you drive a highway straight through the slums. And that's exactly what's happening in Chicago. That's exactly what you see in Cape Town.
That's what they tried to do in Baltimore with the highway to nowhere.
Yeah.
It's a failed project. Everybody laughs about it now. But basically, that's exactly what they tried to do, was run basically the highway through like West Baltimore and through like Southwest Baltimore rather. And well, it's nice to see that we were doing a master class in segregation. That's kind of nice to see.
Absolutely. Great,
a hub
Good
for
job.
the world, to really come. It's good.
We like to be first in as many areas as possible.
Absolutely.
You're gonna be doing something, do it well.
So how long ago did you move to London?
3 years. I've just got my indefinite leave to remain this week, so that's really exciting.
Congrats again.
Thank you. Yep.
Again, the indefinite leave to remain.
Yep.
That's what it's called. Wow.
Yeah, it's not. I don't know what the U.S. equivalent would be, because when you get a green card, can you get an American passport straight away, or?
I don't think so.
Okay, so this would
think
then
you
be
have
the
a green card that basically says you can
Yeah.
be here. You
Yes.
can be here, but you're not a citizen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can be here in another 2 years because I'm on the global talent visa. It's normally 5 years and 10 years, but I'm on 3 years and 5 years to get a passport.
Gotcha.
I don't know what's going to take place here moving forward.
Yeah, it's
true.
intense.
Everyone's out.
No,
You might have to take Elon back.
please no, absolutely not. I mean, he's planning to fund Nigel Farage, who's our equivalent of like Trump in the UK.
God.
Oh,
That's just
great.
it's
Great.
awful. It's really I despair for the world right now. It's really scary.
Do you guys saw Contact? Jodie Foster movie,
Yeah.
based on but it's just I picture him as the crazy guy who's up in space, like who lives in the thing that's orbiting that ultimately pays for Jodie Foster's second whatever contraption. I'm like, I hope you just get to that stage though.
Yes.
And just go up in your satellite, dude, and live up there, and
we can just cut off communication.
we're good.
We're
good.
I'd like him to just kind of do whatever the submarine which exploded. Can he just do the spacecraft equivalent of that?
Yeah,
Like maybe
exactly.
all the billionaires can go like have the little kind of space exploration, Mars kind of reconnaissance, and just blow up.
Right.
Leave
And
us
be like,
alone.
yeah, we're done. We're done. Even if you go to Mars, dude, have a great time there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's
totally,
fine.
absolutely.
That's fine. Live out your life in whatever way you want to do there. Just do it there, please.
Yeah.
But it's really scary seeing the analogies. Like one of the things the apartheid government did to break the population, to make sure that Black people were kept in a role where they were not able to aspire to higher jobs, was they broke the education system. So there were two different education systems, and kind of the censorship of books. And you're seeing a lot of that happening in America now, like where the education system's being broken. You guys are like destroying records, not you personally, but
Right. Aaron does, actually. It's what he does.
It's my side job.
Yeah. He's a book burner and science denier.
No, I think we're in good hands now. We've got a billionaire ex-wrestling federation founder's wife in charge of education. So
I know,
it's fine.
it's perfect.
what could go wrong?
And RFK is using kind of apparently a staffing application form designed by Jordan Peterson. I'm like,
I just read about that.
I had not seen that.
Yeah,
But
no,
raw milk for everyone.
I know, perfect. It's just, yeah.
We're all bathing in the bird flu.
Yeah.
But it's funny. So you talked about that. Like, so Chicago and Detroit are the two cities that you've written about in America that I've read.
Yep.
Why them? Like, I don't know. I just
Yep.
of the places. I'm assuming you came to here
I did,
and
absolutely.
spend a significant amount of time to sort of wallow in it.
Or you just watch RoboCop a lot.
I did. I mean, 100, obviously.
There's that too, of course. Of course, watched 8 Mile. I watched 8 Mile, and I was like,
Yeah, done. Easy.
got it.
Only love is left alive, yeah.
Why them? Why, like?
So, my first two novels were set in South Africa. So Moxieland is a cyberpunk Cape Town, where everyone's controlled by their cell phones. And there was a plague in 2018, which I'd forgotten until I taught it recently. Or talked to a school that was, the kids were learning it.
Oh,
And
wow.
then Zoo City was set in Johannesburg, which won the Arthur C. Clarke Award, and it's kind of this phantasmagorical noir love letter to Johannesburg. With The Shining Girls, I knew I wanted to write a time-traveling serial killer, and I knew that I didn't want to do Bill and Ted's excellent killing spree through time. What fun as that would have been?
That's a great log line. That's a great
I know,
log line.
I would read it.
Strange things afoot at the Circle K.
I wanted to use it as a way of kind of exploring where we are in the world, I think, which I try to do with all my books. So I knew I wanted to do 20th century only, and I wanted to stop before Reddit, before the internet could help start sleuthing this.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
If I set it in South Africa, it would immediately have to become about overthrowing apartheid. You couldn't write a time travel novel set in South Africa that wasn't about that. It would just,
Right.
Yeah.
Especially with color every single aspect of all
Absolutely.
of it, because it was still moving there very well.
Yeah. I'd lived in America. I'd lived in New York, and I'd lived in Chicago. I'd lived in London for a short time as well. London didn't feel right. The 20th century, I think, is very much the American century. And New York felt overblown.
I don't know. We like to think every century is the American century, but that's
Sure, of course.
No, 20th century was our century. Now this is the century that it all ends, and then
Sure.
yeah,
Start over.
So yes, I lived in Chicago, and Chicago felt like a really good analog for Johannesburg. I went there on a research trip to go and revisit and stay with my friends who I'd lived with while I was living there. And they're like, oh yeah, there were 40 shootings this weekend. And I was like, 40 shootings? Are you kidding me? Like, what?
Yeah.
So it's quite a crime. Yeah, at the time, when I was writing the book in 2011, 2012, there's a lot of crime. There's a lot of kind of history of corruption with mayors and corrupt mayors.
Sure.
They learned how to do segregation there. And yeah, so it felt quite close to Johannesburg in terms of kind of the big themes that I was interested in. But also Chicago as a place rooted in history is really interesting because it's where nuclear fission was done for the first time underneath the University of Chicago. It's where Charlie Chaplin started in the movie industry and then moved to California. So it was through this birthplace of all these really, really interesting things. And as I started doing more research and I wanted to talk about these themes, so it's about a time-traveling serial killer, but really it's about the survivor who, now turns the hunt around.
Right.
But it's this impossible mystery. And I wanted to it's called The Shining Girls, and all the women are special in their circumstances. So none of them are going to grow up to be next president of America. although let's be real, you guys are never going to elect a woman as a president.
Right. We had a shot at it that didn't work. So on to
but they're
the
like
next.
unconventional in their times. And so really it's kind of exploring misogyny and exploring kind of the political and socioeconomic climate of different eras. So one of them is a lesbian commie architect in the 40s. And one of them is a black woman welder in the start of World War II, working in the shipping yards. And her husband has not got a medal because he was black. And then there's an abortionist character. And that was fascinating to find out, when I was digging into it. I was like, I do want to get into women's rights and like abortion rights in particular. And
that's the Jane.
So there's this amazing
right?
organization called Jane. And they used to provide, because abortions at the time were done by the mafia. And they would pick you up on the side of the road. You pay $500 in like the 60s. They throw you into the back of the car, take you blindfolded to somewhere, like scrape you out, and then dump you bleeding on the street again. Yes. And this women's organization called Jane was like, this is not okay. This is inhumane. So they started this it was doctors and activists, and they started this kind of secret underground network, and you could ask for Jane, and you could pay whatever you wanted. And researching the real stories was so inspiring and so amazing. So it was a way of kind of like exploring these histories, and then also looking at big themes which relate to South Africa, like, the fear of communism and McCarthyism is a reflection of the war on terror, but also a reflection of apartheid with the Black Scare and the Red Scare. So it's these themes of history which come up again and again, and you hope they get resolved, but they're not.
So going back to the Jane thing, did you just come across that, or were you seeking that out, or trying to find some level of that, or you'd heard of it?
I was looking for some level of that, and then I had a young history student who was working with me, and like I got her I was like, look, I want something about abortion. Find me something about abortion. She's like, here is Jane, and like I bought the book, which is all these real life stories of the women who worked at Jane, and like the people who would come for abortions would be like a 12-year-old girl who was raped, or the 47-year-old who was finally ready to leave her abusive husband, but now she was pregnant again. And she might have a jar of pennies, and they were like, that's fine. And so I was a journalist for a very long time, and I think real stories are like often more surprising and more inventive than anything you could make up. And I love being able to weave in that kind of real intrinsic detail.
Where were you a journalist?
I was freelance, so I worked for various magazines and newspapers. The kind of job that wouldn't be possible now because you're going to have like AI and chatbots and LLMs scraping stuff. But I got to do some really cool journalism for a Miss HIV positive beauty pageant, for example, or interviewing homeless sex workers. And then I also paid the rent by doing really dumb jobs on best small conference venues in Cape Town. And I'd have to phone all the small conference venues and be like, what facilities do you have? Do you have a swimming pool? What other extras do you have?
Rent.
Yeah, exactly.
Hard hitting.
Yeah, but that paid no rent. And that allowed me to develop my voice, and it allowed me to do the really fun stories, which paid nothing. But got me onto the world, got me to experience like more of life than a nice white protected middle class South African could have experienced.
Yeah, I feel like the acknowledgments at the end of Shining Girls is like a chapter. It's like 2 chapters all in themselves. Like, it just kept going, and it's great, and it's awesome. And I guess now the journalism part of that totally makes sense to me now. It connects on it, but I'm like, because I feel like usually you get like thanks to this person or that person, thanks to my editor and that that whereas. I feel like you had like a team of people doing tons of research in thousands of areas. Like, there's a lot there.
I had one researcher who was amazing. And then I just went and interviewed people, and I hung out with people.
That's so
and
cool.
It's the same in Detroit. I went there and I met people, and I was like, you are showing me around Detroit. Show me your Detroit. Yeah. And so I interviewed cops and artists. I'm looking at adapting Broken Monsters as a TV show at the moment. And I went back to Detroit recently in October, and had a whole bunch of new amazing conversations with like cops and artists and teenagers. And like this cool lesbian FBI agent who was like, yes, we're going up to the cold body farm next week. Does anybody here want to come? So I really want to come, but it wasn't actually for me.
What is the cold body farm?
So it's a body farm is where you look at you basically bury a body or you leave it out and you see what happens, like what insects propagate and kind of.
How fun.
So it's a forensics procedure, but the cold body farm is when it's in cold weather.
Okay.
So it's specifically looking at like, so if a body's dumped in July, how's that going to be different to a body dumped in November?
Have you been to one of those before?
No, I'd love to.
Like a warm body or just a regular, like tepid body farm?
No.
Yeah. Is there one near a beach?
For sure. Yeah, no, that'd be nice. Like right now, I'm like, please can I go to a body farm right now?
Lovely.
There's a big one outside of DC, I think, right?
I think so.
Why do you know that? Just because
I've used it a couple of times.
Wow.
It's a great way to get rid of the evidence. You're like, yes, there's a body I donated for.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's used for like FBI training.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Oh, that makes sense, I guess. Yeah, like Quantico, that kind of area.
So I have two questions that go in very different directions.
Right.
One was all of your sci-fi and thriller writing. I know like you get into that world like horror and fantasy and stuff, and people tend to think that, it's a little more fantastic. It's a little sillier at times than drama.
Sure. It's not high literature.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. But listening to how you prepare for this stuff, I mean, this is all completely outside of your realm, and it takes tons and tons of research. It's pretty staggering the amount that I'm hearing that goes into what you're writing, but what you're writing is really detailed. So like, how many books are you working on at a time, and how long does it take?
Usually only one. And, if I'm really going, if it's really going well and I'm not trying to emigrate at the same time, I can definitely write a book in a year.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
But
from idea to publish?
Yeah. Well, no, not to publish, like publishing.
But to complete.
Yeah, to completion. And then it'll probably be like 2 or 3 years with the kind of publishing long tail at the moment. But yeah, so I think the research is the most fun part. If I could just do the research and never have to write the book and just get paid for that, that would be great.
Well, that's where AI comes in.
But
You're
apparently,
like, all right.
no one wants to just hear about my entertaining stories. I can't get paid for that. Very disappointing. But yeah, no. So it depends on the book, and it depends on like the kind of what I'm interested in. So my last book, Bridge, which is about a young woman who's searching for a mother across the multiverse.
I have that on my list. I'm really looking forward to it.
The mom's a neuroscientist, and so I spent a lot of time hanging out with like neuroscientist friends, and then also musicologists, because there's this thing called the dream worm, which allows you to access other realities, and you kind of do a Freaky Friday body swap into the other version of Aaron or the other version of Ken, and maybe Aaron is like water skiing through Barbados with that universe's Elon Musk, but now suddenly he's sitting in front of a podcast and he's like, what the fuck, how did I get here, what is happening?
Right. So it literally is like a swap,
it's a swap. Yeah.
Okay,
but it's only a temporary swap, so you can experience a little bite of like this other life that you could have lived, but the other person isn't consenting, and they've just arrived in your body, and now you gotta hope that they don't run into traffic. None of which is plausible or possible at all, but like if you're gonna have a ridiculous concept, I think you really have to root it in like the strong stuff. So I got to hang out with my friend Haley Tomes, who's a neuroscientist, neuroparasitologist in particular, and I got to hang out with her in her lab, and she's like mushing up the tapeworm and then injecting into like slices of rat brain, and like telling me these crazy like neuroscience stories and explaining like the life cycle of tapeworm. And it's really interesting because tapeworm is the leading cause of epilepsy in Africa 10 years after infection. And it's if you accidentally eat it in toxic meat.
Wow.
So, or like meat with eggs in it, not toxic meat, but
Sure, I know what you mean, yeah. Yep.
Which I think is kind of what happened with RFK and the worm in his brain, but I'm not entirely sure.
It's still working. We're actually still waiting for it to finish manifesting. Yes.
Yeah, I think that came from some bad whale meat.
Yeah,
yes.
Probably. Absolutely. Endangered, right?
Baby seal.
Yeah, but at the end of like this day, like hanging out with her, she's like, "Oh, do you want a slice of rat brain to take home with you?" And I was like, "Yes, obviously."
On toast?
Yeah, she was so excited. She was like, "Oh, amazing, great!" And she went and prepared me a little slice of rat brain, which looks like a piece of desiccated snot on a glass slide. I brought it with me to the UK, and it's obviously called Pinky, like Pinky in the Brain. So
that's nice.
But see, that part is like way more fun than the actual sitting and writing and figuring out, like, I mean, and I'll take a great scene and just kind of plant it verbatim. So that scene of me hanging out in Haley's lab is basically in the book, but with different characters,
Yeah. It's funny. I'm assuming the research part of it really feeds that, because Aaron and I talk about it a lot, but I feel like where books and movies, whatever, TV shows, whatever, elevate is in the dialogue between the characters.
Oh, yeah.
And like how they talk to each other and how believable that feels and how real it is. And I think probably in that sense, you get that from the research part of it. Like, the characters, the people, and they're probably, half based on people you actually hung out with in a way,
Yeah.
Can't not be, right?
Right. Those obscure details really make it.
I think it really, really makes it work for it. And I think you're really, really good at writing that in that way.
Thank you.
It's preparation for it.
It comes from journalism. It comes from sitting and transcribing hours and hours and hours and hours of interview tape. And kind of you're listening for the pull quote, you're listening for the quote which is going to be in bold in the article, or it's going to like do your shift in the tone of the article, like this is kind of where the midpoint happens. But yeah, the way people describe themselves and like the way people characterize themselves. I was meeting with a property developer in Detroit, and I'm sitting with my artist friend and outside in this kind of courtyard of this downtown area that he's redeveloped, and he's like very tall in this like amazing suit and with sunglasses with a shaved head, like very kind of like Lex Luthor-y. And a hornet lands on the table, and he just smacks it with his bare hand and kills it dead and flicks it off the table. And we're both like sitting there going, "What?" And I don't know if I could actually put that scene in a book or a TV show because it's too on the nose. It's too heavy-handed.
It's real like Snidely Whiplash kind of.
It seems very super villainy. Yes.
But the way people explain themselves, with Detroit, I spent a couple of days working in an amazing homelessness organization called NOAA. And I went back there again this time around. And, I interviewed this man, Thomas Keane, who was just absolutely phenomenal. And he told me a lot of his life story. And I used some of with his permission, and I also paid him for it. I used some of that verbatim, which doesn't mean the character is him. It's just that they have a shared traumatic incident in their past. But the way he talked about himself as kind of the landlord of abandonments. And he called himself a thug nerd because he was running the IT department and helping people do their CVs, but also, carried a knife hidden in his walking stick.
Right.
Again, like I wouldn't have made up the word abandonment. I would never have come to that.
Right. But you get there from that.
I love using the fantastic as a way of telling like a really important kind of story about who we are right now. But I think you have to really anchor it with those credible details, with that kind of real dialogue. I also had someone, a critic wrote a review of The Shining Girls, where she was very annoyed that all the characters were so witty. But it was the same day that one of my ex-studio mates in Cape Town phoned me and she was like, Lauren, I can't help but notice, I finished the book, I can't help but notice you stole half our conversations. It's not my fault, like the reviewer doesn't have witty friends, but I do.
Real pat on the back. Yeah. That was a complaint.
As long as you don't fall into like the Gilmore Girls, like the Gilmore Girls thing. If it's like every line is just like every character has like the perfect zinger and everything moves so fast, that for me is like great.
And if everybody has the same kind of zingers, if everyone has the same kind of humor, like, And I think, I've only written one novel, which is kind of only single POV, which is Zoo City. And I think what I love about being able to write different characters and like from different point of views is that you're getting a different sense of the story. You're getting a different perspective on the story. And I also love that kind of unreliable narrator aspect where you're you're like, oh, but that's not what happened.
Right. And that though. It's cool too.
Yeah.
A lot of my favorite books have that trope in them. So writing sci-fi, obviously, you're doing all the research, you're putting in these really intimate details. How concerned are you with sticking to the rules, the science?
The rules are so it's made up, so time travel does not exist as far as we know. If it does, please can somebody come fix where we are right now? And you can't swap realities, and people in Johannesburg do not have magical animals attaching themselves to them. But the rules have to be very consistent. And with The Shining Girls, like there's a great image of me, it was in Wired magazine with my murder wall, where, the time travel had to be very, very carefully planned. And when the killer kills someone, he takes something from them, but then he also leaves an artifact on their bodies. So I had to track the movement of the artifacts. I had his timeline, which is from 1931 when he discovers this time traveling house to 1993 when something happens. I had the historical timeline, which of course is all out of order. And then like the murder, the historical timeline is in order. But his murder timeline is out of order. But then I also, so he'll kill someone in 1943 before he kills someone in 1931. So that had to be like tracked and carefully. And does he have the object yet? No, because he hasn't killed this other woman yet. And for me, it was Greek tragedy time travel. So it was, you're kind of locked in. It's Sisyphus, it's Prometheus. It's like, this is the thing which is always going to happen. The events are the events. It's kind of this closed loop. And with the TV show, they went multiverse time travel, which was really interesting.
How long did the editing process take for that? I was thinking about that, like to go through that and just make sure, like, and just double check and all that stuff. And I'm picturing just the beautiful mind board of like, this is the timeline.
You can find this picture of me online. Like it's quite hectic. I've got like all the red string and like the photographs.
That's what I'm totally picturing. Yep.
Yeah. And then of course, in the middle is the novel's timeline, because like you're not finding out the story of any of those other things. And like the strings attaching the artifacts to where he leaves them. And also I dealt with him by like, I hated writing him so much because he was so awful. Like he was a real serial killer. And I think Jamie Bell was so good in the TV show because he's this little incel piece of shit, which is what real serial killers are. They're not these monstrous, amazing, brilliant men. They're just broken little
mundane.
Men. Yeah,
right.
But I've dealt with writing him by injuring him. So at one point I've gotten bitten by a dog. I got stung by a bee, and then at one point, like Zora, the welder in the 1940s, she breaks his jaw. Yeah. And now I'm like, God, what medical treatment was available in the 1930s for a broken jaw, and how long would that take to heal? And then I also have to track his injury through the novel's timeline to make sure that he's had enough time to heal and when he's going to have the broken jaw and the wires around his jaw. And I'm just like, why have you done this to yourself? This is insane.
It also, I thought it also kind of gave him a good way of making him stand out in little ways to other people. Like, absolutely. Oh, the guy with the limp or the guy with the broken jaw or the guy, whatever, and so it kind of does make an impression a little bit in that way too. And you just get to beat the hell out of them, which is kind of.
But my editor, Helen Moffat, is amazing. Like, she's just absolutely brilliant. I've worked with her on all my books since Moxieland, and I'll work with my American, British, and South African editors. The way I describe it is they are I'm the chef, they're the restaurant critics, and Helen Moffat is my sous chef.
Okay.
They're allowed to come into the restaurant. They're allowed to say, this is working, this isn't working. Have you thought about this? God, this has got to go. And that's fine, but they're not allowed in the kitchen. So it's me and Helen in the kitchen, and we will sort everything out. And she is so immaculate. She's absolutely brilliant. She will find, and she's also like, I've had 2 people call me on my stuff before. The one was Helen, but she was like, this chapter, really? And I was like, no one else said anything. And she's like, it's not good enough. And I'm like, I know. And then my French translator on Zoo City made me rewrite a chapter. Made me rewrite a page because he was like, the sewer system doesn't work that way. And I was like, oh, fine. So I rewrote something quickly, and he came back to me in a very French way and was like, yes, I suppose it is all right, but it's not quite up to your usual standard. Wow. And I was like, okay, fine.
Wow, all right, okay.
But I love that. I love working with good editors. I love working with kind of, working in comics where you're working with an amazing editor, but also an artist who's interpreting things in a different way. And I've worked in kids animation, and I love that collaborativeness where you're playing and people are making things more or better, or they see through the heart of it and they're like, oh, this is how it needs to go. This is what's really exciting.
They raise the bar, and this is a lot about you too, that they're saying that you can do better.
Yeah, no, completely. And it's so great to have that. And it's so great to like be able to like learn from people and be like, I think writing novels, everything is so much on you, and it feels like a lot of pressure. So it's amazing to have other people and other minds kind of come in and tell you how to fix things or make things better, and sometimes they're wrong, but
Yeah. Right.
Can we tangent for just a second to the to the animation thing? Yeah. Thanks for joining my podcast, Aaron. Anyway. So how did you get into the animation thing, the cartoon thing?
Yeah,
Flores Dragons.
Flores Dragons, but before that we did Urbo, The Adventures of Pax Africa, which was South Africa's first half-hour animated TV show.
Oh, cool.
And it ran for 104 episodes. It's had multiple reruns.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
The Flores Dragon jumped out at me just because it seemed so deeply kids-centered. The same, you're writing about
serial killers,
serial killers and mutilated deer people. And then also writing about Tutu, the dragon who can play the trumpet with his nose.
Exactly. So that Flores Dragons is an adaptation of an existing book by Anne Vrombo. So I was just one of the writers on the show. But with Urbo, The Adventures of Pax Africa, I was basically the showrunner and the head writer. And I worked with some amazing other writers, and we had this whole animation studio. So it came up, my now ex-husband, but then partner was a director, and he knew this producer, and the producer was like, I really want to pitch an animated TV show. Do you know any writers? And my ex was like, oh yeah, there's this girl I'm dating, so very nepotistic.
That's great for that.
But we put together a pitch, and we worked with 4 animators, and we like put something together for the SABC, and it was so fun. I was like, this is never going to go anywhere. And suddenly it was commissioned, and suddenly we grew from a team of like 6 people to a team over the course of a year to a team of 100 people.
Oh my gosh!
And we were the biggest.
Where was this in your writing journey?
In Cape Town in 2005.
That's right. I meant in time. Like, where were you at this point? So were you writing novels as well at the time?
I was trying to, but I was really struggling. Like, I wanted to write novels. So I was mainly a journalist. Moxieland only came out in 2008. I'd written a pop history about South African women. But then I was working in animation. It was like really, and it was so fun. It was great because everything was in-house. So we'd have like story time with the animators. And when we were a small company, we would be with everyone in the room, and we talked them through the episode of each story. When we got much bigger, it was only with the heads of departments, but we had everyone there. So my ex-husband was he was the producer and director, and he was running this pipeline of 11 weeks. It was one of the fastest pipelines in the world at that time. And each department had 1 week to do their job. So it was script, storyboard, voiceover, 2D animation, 3D animation, final mix, final edits. But it was great because you could walk through the studio and see what the animators were doing, and you could sit in on the audio recordings and see what the actors are doing, and you could change the scripts accordingly. You'd be like, oh, actually, like this actor is doing something entirely different with this character that I hadn't thought of, and that is more interesting. So let's go with the actor's instinct and move the character more towards that.
And because you're there, because you're actually there in the space, like you can do that. It's awesome too that you had that to help sort of be a creative. So you're doing something creative, doing something fun, doing that you love, and obviously we're passionate about at the same time of sort of launching your further career, I guess.
Absolutely. And it taught me dialogue, and it taught me kind of, very visual storytelling. If you've got a 24-minute kids show, there's no time to mess around. Every line of dialogue has to move the plot forward or tell you something about the character. Right. You start a scene as late as possible, and you get out as early as possible. And some poor boss is going to have to draw what you've described. So you're going to have to go and you're going to answer to them because they're in the next room and they're going to come up to you and be like, what were you thinking? I can't have 7 people talking in this scene. What is wrong with you?
Right.
Face spiders erupt over Table Mountain? No. So to have that kind of live feedback and that kind of play space was amazing. And the other writers I hired to work with me was Sarah Lotz, who's an amazing author herself. Sam Wilson got a new book out called The First Murder on Mars. Which
is that Elon Musk? The story of Elon Musk?
Yeah. Not Elon Musk, unfortunately, in the murder. But and then Greg Cameron went on to writing and directing animated TV shows for Netflix. Wow. I think his movie is SEAL Team. And it's with Seal, the musician, plays a seal. He has a cameo as a seal.
I'm hooked. That's all I need to know about it.
A little on the nose.
But
I love it.
Immaculate.
I'm in.
Does he sing Kiss from a Rose?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, if you've got smaller kids, like they will absolutely love it. It's hilarious.
That's fantastic.
Maybe he sings Arf, 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 which is even funnier.
Oh, what a classic one. Classic.
Nice. So how much do you like TV script writing versus novel?
It's a different format, obviously. Yeah, I think, I've been working on original horror with some friends, and which has been really fun. With Broken Monsters, it's tricky because I wrote the book. So it's like, okay, you're going to have to shove some stuff aside. Like some of the stuff is absolutely not going to work. And especially like looking at, the book's set in 2014. Do I update it? Do I leave it behind? But I think, I love good television. I think there's so much that people are doing with the medium. Fargo season 5 was absolute perfection. It was
Fargo,
so good.
Start to finish is like one of my favorite shows of all time. That's what we were talking about with dialogue.
We were just talking about that was actually one of the with dialogue, how great it is.
No, absolutely. And the dialogue is incredible and it shows you so much about the character. And I think that's maybe dialogue is one of my strengths, I hope. So I think that's something that I can really kind of lean into. And I watched my cousin Vinny with my 16-year-old the other day because she just wanted something cute and and she was like, this is a 5-star on Letterboxd. I'm like, really? But it is. Like the dialogue is incredible. Everything is a callback. Like the relationship between them is so perfect. It's just immaculate. So it's just kind of making sure that then it's kind of figuring out how to unfold that over 8 episodes. It's a different format, but you've also got to be able to slaughter your darlings and leave them for dead.
That's what I was gonna say, because so for Shining Girls, because they made a bunch of changes to it for the TV show to make it work. Are you finding that you can do that for Broken Monsters easily?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so I think I'm quite an intuitive writer. So where I struggle is writing the beats. I really find that really irritating. I don't want to write a roadmap. I just want to dig into it and figure out. I mean, I do. The terms people are using these days are plotters, pantsers, and headlights. So plotters are people who plot immaculately. Pantsers are people who fly by the seat of the pants. And then headlights, it's an E.L. Doctorow quote, which I used to use a lot. So I'd like to think I popularized it, but I don't know if I did. Where writing is like taking a road trip at night and you can see 20 feet ahead of you in the headlights and you just need to stay on the road. And for me, that's what a lot of writing is. I know where I'm leaving from and I know where I'm going to. And I know some of the major way markers along the way.
You're not trying to hit the insight ending. It's on page 12 and first starting point at 25.
No, I can't want to do that. But I think there's such a subconscious magic to writing, which I think is very important to me in my part of the process. With Broken Monsters, there was a scene right at the end where one of the characters has something in his pocket. And it was literally 2 days before it was a day, I think we had to send it to the edits for final proofs. This was it. And I'm sitting there talking to my editor, Helen Moffat. I'm like, what is it? What is it? And she's like, it's the shoes. Obviously, it's the shoes. And I'm like, oh my God, of course it's the shoes. I set that up in chapter 3.
Right. Wow.
And, there's the thing that the book is smarter than the writer. And there's so much subconscious stuff that you're not even aware of.
Yeah.
And it was obviously that. And I had set it up. And I was like, oh, thank God past me actually knew what they were doing on some weird level.
Well, that's so when you're doing the multiverse thing too, it's to track that down. I actually have a question about multiverse thing.
Yeah.
How do you keep the guardrails on? If you're not going to be somebody that's plotting it, like you said, you're not laying out every single moment of everything. Obviously, there are key points that you want to hit, but in that space, if you can do anything in the world, sort of within reason,
you still need to have stakes, is what you're saying, and you can't just say anything goes.
Yeah,
right.
So I still need to have stakes. And look, to be real, the perfect mother-daughter multiverse story is Everything Everywhere All at Once, which luckily came out when I was in edits and not when I was writing the book, because I would have given up.
Oh, right, bagged it, right. It's so good.
But I kept mine mundane. So it's what I called it was compatible universes. So you're not going to go to the universe where you get to be Spider-Pig. And you're not going to go to the universe where you get to be a googly-eyed rock. or have sausage fingers. It's just not.
I'm out. Then. I'll see you guys.
Sorry, I know, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. But even just like plot points wise, like you could do any, you could be on water skiing, you could show up in the White House, like how do you say that? That doesn't make that. That's dumb. I'm not gonna do that. Or that's great.
I just have a strong sense for it. I just know what I want to do. But I do, I do also plot everything out. Like, so especially if I have multiple points of view characters. And with Bridge, you don't just have multiple points of view, you have multiple points of view from multiple different universes. So, you've got the character Bridge or Bridget, but you've got in the book, you encounter 100 of them, but they're 4 or 5 who are the main people that we're going to have repeat business with. Mm-hmm. So, I'll put them up on cards on the wall and I handwrite them because I just like that print process. But if you're using software like Scrivener, you can actually just print them out. And I'll color code them so I know which characters are which, and I know which, and then I can also see what mix of voices I have, and I haven't checked in with the bad guy Amber for a little bit. Let me go back to her, and to have that kind of visual representation also helps me work out the timeline and the plot and where the holes are.
How much space do you need to write?
A warehouse.
I work in a shared studio space, but I basically need a blank wall, and I've just managed to get a blank wall in my studio space. I've managed to move to one of the coveted desks in the back. So now I've got a wall that I can put things up on.
Okay.
It's really important for me to go into a space with other people, partly because of ADHD body doubling. I need other people around me are working. I'm yes, I am also working. Look at me work.
I'm doing what you're doing. Yes.
But also I'm very social. I find writing very lonely. I'm stuck in my head with imaginary people, and they're fine, but they're not as good as real people. Real people are... I think there's an amazing South African philosophy called Ubuntu. I know it's also a programming language.
Yeah. Yes, I use
that.
But
the Ubuntu philosophy is that people are people because of other people. And, and I think that's such a beautiful thing is our connection to other people is what makes us fundamentally human. And I think that's the most important experience you can have as a human is connecting to other people.
Yeah, it's a question I have for a lot of writers because it is such a work of solitude.
Yeah.
And it can get lonely. And some people love that. I'm very, very far from one of those people. Whenever I'm moping around the house, I've said this a million times again, my wife kicks me out. She's just go to your friends. Go talk to people. You'll feel better.
Completely. When I was married and writing at home and my ex was before the animation, he'd come home from his day job and I'd be desperate to go out. I'd just be like, can we go out? And he'd say, no, I just need to be home and chill out. But also, in South Africa, I'd end up then going out and I'd be desperate to talk to anyone. So the poor cashier at the supermarket or the petrol attendant, I'd be like, hi, how was your day? And they're like, oh God.
Right. I feel like that's one of those you're turning into your parents' commercials.
Oh yeah,
the person chatting with the
dial it back
person.
Try again.
Yeah, dial it back. Nope.
Although it is one of my gifts is I do have very easy connections with people, and a friend of mine and I have joked about having a podcast series which is just talking to Uber drivers, because if you got a long journey an airport trip, I get deep, man. I will find out everything. And
Aaron's very the same way.
Same way. I used to travel a lot for work, and I often made friends and was invited to some weird places, events, things. Yeah.
It's amazing because it is that kind of weird, strangeness of connection, and it's lovely. And I think that's also why, I'm very anti-LLMs and AI, not least because I've had 6 of my works harvested. But also because it's going to put people out of work and it's going to destroy creative industries and it's going to make us fundamentally more stupid and primed for fascists and the destruction of education and critical thinking and everything else. But it's also when you're writing from such a human experience, and it is that subconscious magic of stuff which happens on the page, which maybe you hadn't anticipated, and it veers in a different direction. Or a character saying a line of dialogue, you're like, oh God, of course that's what they're thinking, or of course it's the shoes. But it's also writing from lived experience. It's writing from being a human in the world, and it's that subconscious magic of putting weird things together.
What about for any upcoming film, TV?
So I'm just working on the Broken Monsters adaptation at the moment with a really cool production company. I don't actually know how much I'm allowed to talk about that. And another adaptation that we're working on with a company called Bad Wolf, who made Killing Eve and Lady in the Lake, Doctor Who, and really lovely producers who we're working with. I've got an idea for a slightly more mainstream novel. It's not mainstream by my standards, but it's not as weird as this other one that I really want to write. So,
Right.
Yeah. And I've just had a short story come out with Uncanny Magazine, which is about a gecko necromancer. It's my only high fantasy entry.
The Necro
kind of an
Gecko.
anti-colonial love and revenge story about an African traveling party going through Spain to go and kill a conquistador. This gecko.
What's it called?
It's called The Geckomancer's Lament.
Yeah.
And I recorded the audio edition
Geckomancer.
with a friend of mine, Luyanda Lewis Nyawo, who is a South African non-binary actor based in London. And they managed to squeeze me in their schedule between filming Wednesday because they're the deputy sheriff in the TV show Wednesday. But they took time out of their schedule to like record this kind of bonkers, but maybe also heartbreaking story about a gecko that's trying to get revenge for his lost love.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
I feel like that's one that somebody at a bar said Geckomancer, and somebody was like, "Yes,
yeah." No,
I don't even know what the story is, but it's going to happen now.
Yeah,
but
sure.
It was interesting, like the process of writing, right? Because like I was like, cool, I'm just going to write something fun and silly because I'm like dealing with like a lot of like the world is like really scary and dark, and I kept trying to write like into these horror stories, and I was like, just don't want to write this. It's horrible. So I was like, no, I'm just going to do light and fun and silly. But of course, I get into anti-colonialism and like the true history of a woman called Sarah Bartman, who was a South African woman who was put on display in Piccadilly Circus and eventually dissected by the French government. And, Nelson Mandela had to campaign to get her remains back from the Museum of Natural History. And it's kind of like there's a character who shares like some of that past, but gets a kind of turnaround, come back on that. But it's also, I didn't realize this at the time that I was writing it. It's so much about gaslighting as well. And thinking that we're all in it together. And I only realized that after Trump won. And I was like, oh, that's what the story is also about, Yeah.
Do you feel like, to use your driving metaphor, it's like you're driving, but then you just can't not stop at the wax museum of whatever along the way? Like you're just, I'm going to go on this fun journey. It's just going to be, what is that over there?
Oh, that creepy path through the woods. That looks
right. I can't not go there.
Yeah.
So real quick, did you say you go and you work in a space, like a studio space to go write? So you're out there and like, do you leave your wall of crazy index cards, of color-coded index cards and all that stuff and just have your space and you're like,
I've literally just moved into the space, into the back office, like where I have wall space. So I'm actually ready to be able to put it up now.
Were you in like a cubicle before?
It's kind of open plan, but it's really interesting. It's all illustrators and animators and designers. Cool. There are actually a couple of other writers, which has been lovely.
Like day traders in there.
But it's not a WeWork. It's like you rent your desk. That is your desk. There's a big community. We have Friday hamburgers. We had somebody's 50th birthday the other day. Somebody else does comedy, and we go watch her shows and go to book launches.
That's cool.
It's really cute. It's really nice.
That sounds amazing, but it's like all creative.
It's all creatives, yeah. And your desk is your desk, so it's not like different people every day. It's like, so you really build relationships with people.
That's awesome.
No one's messing with your timelines.
No, not yet.
Are there other people that are doing like, sort of high level work? I just feel like you seem so approachable and unassuming. I wouldn't, like you seem so personable that I'm like, wow, aren't you kind of a big fish in a pond there a little bit?
No,
I don't. It's hard for you to say that. Obviously,
a lot of people doing really high level work. There's a friend who's doing like he's doing a giant mural for I don't think I'm allowed to say, but like one of the big gaming companies is launching a new office space, and he's doing this enormous mural. Somebody else is doing stuff for Google, so like they're pretty high up people.
They're working. Okay, cool.
Very cool. So it's really lovely.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I kind of want to dive into the last big question, unless Ken, you got something else?
No, I covered Flory's Dragons. That was my big note.
We also worked on a French animated show called Mook, which is delightful, which is also in the UK. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about there was a puppet show, right?
Yes.
That did not see the light of...
No, it did. So we wrote the pilot.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Yeah. It became something different. So I wrote the pilots. I co-wrote the pilots. It was Zen News. It's based on Spinning Images, which is the UK political satirical puppet show. We had our former president, Jacob Zuma, who was then the president, and Manta Shabalala, who was the head of the health department, and thousands of people died from HIV/AIDS because she wouldn't say that HIV caused AIDS and get interviews. So we got to deal with some quite political stuff, which was great. But the SAPC didn't end up commissioning it in that format, but then it went on to find other life elsewhere. But I wasn't involved further than that.
Okay, well, that's good.
But it was really fun to be able to do all these different things, like kids animation and political satire and, weird comics about a J horror take on Rapunzel.
Yeah.
Speaking of puppets, I saw Life of Pi yesterday.
Oh yeah, and the stage show,
the live action,
the stage show. Yeah,
it's incredible.
How was it?
Yeah,
it was wild.
Yeah,
it's a lot darker than I remembered it was.
It's kind of a dark story.
Was really amazing, and the stage setup was incredible.
Yep.
You'd be looking at a kid talking in a hospital room, and then within 3 seconds, he's in the middle of like a starry night on a boat, and just the way they kind of whip everything around.
It's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really cool. Recommend it.
Very cool.
So our big last question we usually get to is talking about home and your influences.
Yep.
But what there is to do there. So, South Africa, I mean, it sounds like you identify that as home, but now it's very much London.
Yep.
So I'll let you pick, but the question is, can I come in and visit for a day? What are we doing?
Can I do both?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
I said it before, but based on the current political state, we might not be leaving. So don't let that influence your day.
Well, if you do need to leave, my best friend Sam Big Passenger has written a book of how to immigrate to the UK. It's mainly for South Africans, but it does apply to Americans as well.
Well, now it does.
Yeah.
So you can put touristy things in, but we don't need the touristy. We want the Lauren.
No. Okay. So, yeah. So in London, like I'm definitely going to take you to Phantom Peak. It's about to go into its last season. It's immersive theater, but I mean, I've done Punch Drunk, which is amazing, but it's basically it's an old west town, and it's steampunk, which normally would be things I absolutely hate.
Okay.
But it is so fun. They worship the cosmic platypus, but it's also a company town, so there are some company town shenanigans. And all the actors in the town, you come in as tourists from the other dimension. So you're not having to play a character, you're just playing yourself, but you have to interact with the townsfolk. And all of them have different quests for you. So it's kind of part scavenger hunt, part improv, part immersive. And it's so damn fun. My daughter and I have been 6 times. And you might have to help the Undertaker solve the mystery of the necromantic spider that has been, kind of attacking the town, or maybe help the company town owner, Jonas, like suppress the rebels, or maybe help the rebels with the uprising and like kind of find the weird clues by playing the janky old like arcade machine. And it's, and they worship the cosmic platypus. So if you're really lucky, maybe the priest will like baptize you with the holy platypus egg. And it's so ridiculous and so fun and so silly. And it's about to go into its final season, and then they're going to shut it down. It's magnificent. It's so fun.
That does sound fun.
That sounds wild.
I also, my daughter and I managed to finish all the quests, which you can't do in one session. We did over like 3 sessions. And we both independently started our own quests. So she started her own quest to reintroduce platypus testing with the evil, scientist. And I decided to run for mayor, which is not something that you can do. But I started going around to the townsfolk and the other tourists, like trying to get them to sign the petition. And it made into, there's a big finale at the end, and it made into the mayor's speech at the end.
Oh my God, that's great.
I am so mayor.
Nice.
I'm Lauren.
We live in a town called Cockeysville. There was one day, just real quick, that I was getting like a drive from the I dropped my car off at the auto dealer, and they were I was in the little shuttle to go back to work, and I'm driving, and this is during the political season, so there are political signs all over the place and all that stuff. And he's like, and the driver just randomly, it's quiet, I'm not a chatty person, and the driver's, but he's like, hey, see that sign over there? It says like Jim Smith for mayor of Cockeysville. He's like, that's me. He's like, there's no mayor of Cockeysville. He's like, there's no mayor of Cockeysville. He's like, me and my friends just thought it'd be really funny if we printed out these signs that said. So he literally, right in there, in line with all the stuff, it's like he has the mayor of Cockeysville.
I love that he's doing in the real world. I'm not doing the real world.
Right. Well, I was like, this is so ridiculous. I was like, our friends would totally do that. Or we would do it to somebody else. It would certainly not be about it. Wouldn't, and probably not in a flattering way. But anyway, so moving on. So
and then
that sounds
on
fun.
The subject of like really janky machines, because they've got these janky old robots, in Phantom Peak. There's the Museum of Automation in Holborn. It's right in central London. It's tiny, and it's just these really kind of like ridiculous machines that are, I don't know, like there's one with like just really badly made arcade game kind of things. It's not even arcades. It's kind of very basic robotics. And you might have to help the Amazon worker through like the minefield to like deliver all the packages, or you might have to get your hand past the slathering dog, or go to the podiatrist and you got to take your shoe off and stick your foot into this kind of weird machine. And something happens to your foot in the machine. It's just, it is hilarious.
That's great.
It's just
like
really,
Rube
really
Goldberg,
silly.
sort of.
And then cycling along the canals is one of my favorite things to do. Like a lot of people who come to London don't realize that there's this whole system of canals that run through the back of the city, and they're so beautiful and so lovely. I bought a little electric bike, and it's a folding bike, and it's one of my favorite things to do, just kind of cycle through the city and like be able to go along the canals, see this other side of kind of hidden London.
That sounds awesome. Like I think we see that a lot in like shows now that are placed there. Like the canal system that where you see that thing. Like Ted Lasso, I think the one guy's like on a boat in the canal or whatever. But like, that looks awesome.
Nice. You said folding bike?
Yeah. I've got a Go cycle. It's really lovely, a little electric bike. It cost a fortune, but it's my main means of transportation. And just and I bought all the wet weather cycling gear. I've become really hardcore. So I mean, hardcore by e-bike standards.
Right.
It just means I just have access to the whole city, and I've also I can take it on the trains because we have a really incredible rail system here. So also get out of London and go to like Bath or go to Bristol. Bristol's got these crazy hills, but I took my e-bike with me when I was there for a theatre workshop, and I was able to fly up the hill to Pride in like 20 minutes, and it's a very steep hill, but on my e-bike it's just like feel nothing. It's great. Yeah, it's happening, absolutely.
I will say, so from my triathlon thing, the one that same triathlon that I did in the 40-degree weather, the guy was like, make sure you dry your feet off really, really well. Make sure your feet get dry, because your shoes naturally are built to let air flow through them.
Yeah.
And when you're riding your bike in that weather and it's cold, your feet are going to take the brunt of that cold weather. Everything else is covered in windbreaker and all that stuff. But your shoes are designed to let the air in. So as you're e-biking around in the wintertime, in the dark of winter, make sure your feet are well warm.
All the lights, like all the bright lights and all the neon and like all the glow in the dark stuff.
Well, that's good. That's a good look for you too.
I think also like, the queer scene in London is really amazing. I've been going to a lot of like drag king shows, which have been fantastic. And also going to like some female wrestling like events as well, which has been pretty fun and silly. So in Dalston, where I live, there's a lot of kind of queer nightclubs and like bars. There's Vine, there's Dalston Superstore, and there are a lot of like really great little restaurants and cafes and things as well. Yeah.
Where are we going for dinner? Like, what's your go-to?
Probably the Acme Fire Club. Although Brat, I had my birthday dinner at a place called Brat, although it was nothing to do with Charlie XCX. I loved Charlie XCX.
Because it's very timely.
It was very timely. I didn't intend it to be, but it was. And that was really delicious. And it's right next to a place, I can't remember the name. It's a little record store, maybe BCE Records. And then they also have like live music and events and kind of DJs, and that's really fun as well.
Oh, that's killer.
But also just going to the parks. Like just go and sit in London fields, and have a picnic and like chat to people. And the teenagers have secret parties called the Motives. So there's always a motive happening on a Friday or a Saturday night where the kids are
they have a name
drinking
of their
illegally in the
secret
dark
parties.
in Hampstead Heath.
Wow. You're just ratting out your daughter.
I know, I'm
just
ratting
her out. Just all the secrets are coming out now.
Good.
And she will kill me, but I'm not supposed to tell anyone this. But like the one place, which is my actual favorite place in London, is the Hampstead Heath Ladies Pond. It's woman only or femme only, and I have some trans women there as well. And it's just the most magical place. And, people are like topless sunbathing, but then like swimming in this freezing cold, very deep natural pond in the middle of the heath. And it's so magical and so beautiful.
It's like a park? Like you have to like go in?
Heath is this massive park.
Okay,
it's, it's bigger than Central Park. It's just absolutely huge. And they've got a men's pond and a ladies pond, and they've got a mixed pond. But it's just really genuinely magical place. The last time I was there was a fox cub, like running around with a dead pigeon. It was adorable.
Oh, that's cute.
That's really interesting. That's cool.
Yeah, but I'm not supposed to tell anyone. Don't tell her that I told you guys, because she's like, no one must know about this, even though not a lot of people do.
Is it because it's it's the secret spot? Like
it's kind of a secret spot. It's a spot that like, if you're from London, you know about it. If you don't, you probably don't.
Right. Gotcha.
You know what?
No.
Tourists coming in and gawking at people.
No, there's a kind of a secret, a secret members club. It's a real dive bar called Trisha's. But I tried to go there on Saturday nights, and it's in Soho. You pay like £25 for membership, and then you can bring in 5 guests. And I've always had an interesting experience there. It's a real dive. It's really ratty. But the last time I tried to go there weekend, and it's December in Soho. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go to Trisha's and it's going to be fine. But as I walked in, there was this old grizzled guy who's like one of the regulars coming out, and he's like, it's been ruined. Tourists have found it.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's like
worst.
a whole bunch of Japanese tourists, and I was just like, okay.
Great.
Yeah, in London, people have been posting fake reviews for restaurants. They try to make Angus Steakhouse like the number 1 rated restaurant in London to try and like get them to leave the other restaurants alone.
Is that like a chain? Is that like a chain restaurant?
Yeah, it's a big chain steakhouse.
Fantastic.
It's fine, but it's not, it's not a fancy restaurant.
Right. But anyone who is from London knows to go there.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Just anyone listening right now who is visiting London.
Go there. Yes.
Right.
Angus, that's where it's at.
And in Cape Town, I'm not familiar with the restaurants and stuff anymore. But there is my favorite place to go in Cape Town. You should definitely go see the penguins, obviously, but don't go to Boulders Beach. There's Windmill Beach next door, which is free, and you can still see the penguins and still swim with them. Kayaking to Boulders Beach is amazing from Simon's Town. It's quite a hectic kayak in the open ocean, but it's really amazing. a lot of kind of the tidal pools are absolutely beautiful and brilliant. And my favorite place in Cape Town is, again, a swimming hole. It's called Silvermine, and it's a dam right on the top of the mountain on the way to the kind of Takai winelands. And it's just the most beautiful spot in nature. Again, if you're not a local, you're not going to go there because you're going to need a car, you're going to need to rent a car, you're going to need to go up there. But there's mountain biking, you can hike up to Elephant's Eye Cave, and it's just really lovely. People go and have like picnics and barbecues if it's not fire weather, and it's just my favorite place in the whole city.
How cold is that water?
It's not too cold. It's actually pretty warm, and it's the color of like rooibos tea, which of course is a indigenous South African tea. Yeah, I'm sure there are dead bodies at the bottom there, but let's not think about it.
Just don't look too closely.
Yeah, just don't swim too deep. Just let it. Just
lots
enjoy
of amazing restaurants. One of my favorite restaurants in Cape Town, which has been going for like decades, is the Miller's Thumb. It's a husband and wife team. It's in Kloofneck Road, and they do the best fish in like Cape Town, and also the best chocolate chili steak. But there's a bunch of cute little restaurants and like bars and things all around Cliff Street. It's really great neighborhood.
I like how active all of this is too.
Well, it's mainly if I have a chance to get into the water, I'm going to get into the water.
But I just mean like we usually just talk about like food and drinks.
Oh yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. I love all of like the busy activity in these stories as well.
No, so after you gotta do the winelands, you gotta like go to like all the like really amazing wine farms. Dakar is a favorite, but also buy wine and ship it back because it'll be way cheaper than it is in the US, even with customs.
Really?
Yep.
Wild.
It was the one piece of advice my brother gave me when I was immigrating. He was like, buy 10 cases of wine, pay the import duties. It's going to be worth it. And I was like, yeah, it is. It has been.
Wow. That's awesome. Are you white wine or red wine?
White wine. I used to drink red, but I'm much more kind of white and like kind of sharp Sauvignon Blancs, Albarino from Spain. So the thing about immigrating is you suddenly have to learn a whole new language around how to navigate the medical system through to, I don't know any of these wines on the wine list. Like, I guess I'm going to have to learn a whole new palate. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very much a white wine person as well. Don't love red wine.
Yeah. I'm not a big wine person.
You're a big whiner. Ah, see what I did there?
I'm a big whiner.
See what I did there? There we go. Let's go out on that high note.
All right. Good. Well, you got anything else, Ken?
No, I'm good, Ben. That's great. This has been awesome.
That's been really fun. Thanks,
I can't wait. I'm going to definitely.
Yeah, this is fun. I mean, I love talking to writers who are out there, just, I mean, this is the kind of stuff, like, this is my wheelhouse. I love horror, thriller, sci-fi. Right. It's all fun stuff, especially like well-researched.
Yeah, no, I think it's my favorite thing to write. I just think it's so fun to be able to kind of get into these strange worlds, but also as a way of kind of exploring those big social issues of the day and kind of, and having grown up under South Africa and growing up with systemic racism and oppression and poverty and social injustice, be able to like write that into a world that people want to engage with. That's not this very heavy kind of diatribe. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think the best thrillers and horror and any sci-fi stuff like has a social message behind it. It's the best platform to get something across.
Definitely.
Well, a lot to look up, some stuff I want to watch and some stuff I want to read of yours too.
Yeah, definitely. Good luck. We'll look out for. So, where's Broken Monsters as far as where's that at in the development sort of phase right now?
I'm working on it at the moment, so very early on. Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. We'll look it up. Look out for that too.
Definitely. Yeah. The script's like a couple of months away, and then like we'll start taking it out.
I will say, as a newbie to sort of this whole thing, the timeline, how long it takes to do anything is just.
I mean, The Shining Girls took 9 years.
Oh, what a gut punch! You're like, how do I even keep going for that? But it was worth it. So I guess it's all worth it as it goes. Yeah. So
it worked out. It was good.
Very cool. It was very nice meeting you.
Amazing, guys. Thanks so much.
This was lovely.